Yo, 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 hello YouTube, long time no speak. So I'm doing a sit and talk today. I'm in a park and by the road, so hopefully there's not too much interference. So what I want to talk about today is starting to get your act together and starting to prep for tests like the SHSAT. There's also other ones like the CHS, the Catholic High School Test, Beacon and Bard, and maybe not exactly right now, but very soon you should start testing for the Hunter College High School Test, the Bergen County Academies Test, even the ISEE and the SSAT and so on. So it's a good time, even with Corona. So at least for the SHSAT, which normally happens around Halloween time, there's about 5 months or so, 20 weeks, which is a good time to do this. There's also a lot of leeway where there's a lot of wiggle room, so that if a week or two something goes wrong. So really what we want to talk about now was like, where do you start? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go for this? Well, first of all, like I said, this is a really great time to start doing this. And what you want to really do is figure out some sort of grand plan that you want to follow. The sun is following me here. I picked a bad spot maybe. And in the event, you want to figure out your grand plan for yourself and figure out what's going to work from you. The main thing to do is to be consistent and to get yourself in some sort of organized fashion where you're pacing yourself. And you actually want to start documenting where you are, where you're going to, what are your goals, things like that. So it's really important to stay organized. And especially now with coronavirus being one of our issues, it kind of buys you some time in some ways, because school is not really in full force and there's more opportunities here, especially if you were on any teams or did after school activities and so on, with many of those being canceled or at least online. They're not going as thorough, there's not going as deep. So there's more opportunity now to do things like studying and prep and stuff like that. And 20 weeks is a long enough time to kind of fill the blanks in up until around Halloween time, which is when the SHSAT normally is, at least. Again, there's the other tests, they're normally after that, but there's other ones that happen at the fall time as well, okay? And that's the kind of thing where you want to figure out where to pace yourself and get yourself involved with those kind of things, all right? So, and on that note, since we don't know when school is opening, we also really don't know when the SHSAT's going to be. It normally happens around the last week of October and the first 2 weeks in November. But with school not really ending properly, classes are cut short. Some kids still don't have connections, etc., etc. We're in kind of a funny time, an odd time. So you want to consider that too here, which is that the SHSAT realistically may not happen until November or December or even January and February. And I even think it might even make sense to push it far back as into March. All right? Somebody's blasting their radio here. I picked a park by a bad street here. So 20 weeks is a lot of time. On the same hand, it's kind of not. So what you want to do is hatch an overall plan. This has to be specialized to yourself. You want to tailor it to you. If you're this is just something you're have a pie in the sky dream to do, whatever, then that's something you want to consider. But if it's something stronger, you have to work on that too. First of all, your grades should be up to par at this point. Otherwise, you're going to be struggling through a test like this. Okay, it doesn't mean it's impossible. So what you want to do is take a month like June and do research and explore and learn. There's a whole bunch of topics that you want to be able to get into that you may have no clue about right now. So some of them new. You also know where you were at through 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and now 8th grade. And in the case of 9th grade is in 8th grade too. So you want to be learning those things. You know what you did poorly on from September up until March, right? And you pretty much know, because you probably had the curriculum and syllabus talked about by the teacher a few times. You may have a textbook, you may have a syllabus. You can look and see what the other topics are. In any event, I've done some videos explaining what the SHSAT topics are. You can certainly email and ask for those. Anyway, you want to spend June trying to figure out some of your major issues, all right? And there's a couple of weeks there for that. And then in July, you want to start honing things down. So you want to kind of move from major errors into minor errors, and major problems and concerns into minor problems and concerns. Whereas June, you're trying to get the big picture kind of tidied up. In July, you're trying to hone things down. In August, you want to start focusing and making it more about testing. So what you want to do is incrementally and iteratively move from just the general topics and subjects and into the specifics of your test. How does your test work? How is it split apart? What do I need to work about with pacing? What do we need to work about with other parts? You know, and this different categories of stuff like a lot of people like to say the SHSAT is split into two parts, the English and the math, and you should ace one or the other. But actually the math is split into two parts, which is the multiple choice and the grid-ins. They have their own challenges, and the ELA is splitting into really about 4 parts. There is the revising and editing, that's in 2 parts. Okay, and they're slightly different each part. And then there's the reading comprehension. So there's really about 5 or 6 parts when all is said and done about the SHSAT. And you want to ace those, and you want to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are in every single section. At the end of the day, a point is a point. So you want to make sure you know about that, okay? So those are the kind of things you want to start planning. So as you're moving from your grand scheme plan into something more specific, you're not just moving it back from strengths and weaknesses like, oh, I don't know what exponents are, or I don't know how to use a comma. You're also doing it generally speaking. How are you doing in each part? How are you doing in each subject? Okay? I would also be remiss to say that if you don't consider tutoring in your planning, you're making a mistake. Yes, I'm a tutor, and I have a bias to this, and I have a monetary benefit to mentioning tutoring. At the same note, I work with a lot of families. I'm very involved in volunteering myself in different areas, and I'm also very involved in forums and educational forums and stuff like that, where I'm talking to a lot of people. And this happens both before the test and after the test, where there's a lot of people confused. They don't know how the scoring works. They don't know which part to do first. They might be doing poorly in ELA and they don't know what to do. Okay, so there's all these issues that you should really consider. And it may be that maybe you just do tutoring at the very end, or maybe you do tutoring once a month. But don't throw that out the window. A really good teacher, such as me, a good tutor knows the ins and outs of these tests. And it's not just about test taking strategies. You can't game this kind of a test. The only way to get this test is by doing the inners and the outers of it and really figuring it out. You have to think like a test writer. You have to think and understand the topics. You just can't memorize certain formulas and so on and just be done. That's not what this test is about. Other tests are about this, but this one is not. So you want to figure out stuff like that. So in your plans, even if it's just once at the very end or 2 times at the very end, or like I said, once a month, figure out how to incorporate a good tutor into your plans. And by the way, even though I have some of my students also have other tutors, or they go to prep centers. In fact, that's the majority of my students. Go to prep centers and then they use me on the weekends, or vice versa. They might go to the prep center during the weekend and they use me during the week. And it all complements each other. Everybody has different approaches and different skills, and we can reach into your minds and tweak things around for you and help you. Okay, so that's important. By the way, on the note, so in your planning and prep, you're, like I said, in June, you should be researching and figuring out stuff. Part of that is to just go back to the state test, the New York State test, and take some more of those, especially since this year you're not going to get to take it. Okay, and go back to your grade 5, your grade 6, your grade 7, and now that you're in grade 8, you can do that too. Go back to all that material. You have to master it. You have to have no hesitation math. You have to be fluid in reading and writing. You have to know vocabulary. You have to do all these things. So you need to go back to those. You're not just looking at a problem and focusing on the problem that's being addressed. And by the way, they twist the questions back and forth. So if you memorize the answer to a problem, even if the numbers can change, if they twist it and tweak it, you're lost. And by the way, this is a big failure of a lot of kids taking this test and a lot of the families. You need to plan for all the variations of this. And the first and foremost way you're going to do this is by mastering the core material, mastering the fundamentals. You're also going to inch it up after that. Once you've bumped it up, I mentioned going into July and August, once you've bumped it up, you want to one-up things. You don't want to just be satisfied with that. Then at that point, you want to look at the 9th grade regents, the integrated algebra, maybe take a peek at the grade 10 English regents to get harder passages and stuff like that. So you have to get both sides of this, and you have to keep it inching along. So, and your goal and your preparation material, you're not just going to do thousands and thousands and thousands of SHSAT problems. That's a no-win game. That's studying hard but not smart. Now, yes, you do need to study and prep hard for something like this, because you do need to know material. But if you only study hard, you're doing something super duper painful. It's going to take a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, and a lot of your money. Okay, and there's ways to do this by being smart. You're taking a specific test. In this case, what the main thing I'm talking about is the SHSAT here. You're taking a specific test, so you have to prepare for the test, that test, and no other test. All right. So on that note, don't over prep, don't under prep, and don't miss prep. The over prepping, the under prepping, and the miss prepping is what so many families end up getting wrong. And they on test day comes, the kid is surprised as heck that they didn't know what was coming at them, because they were using the wrong material. We can talk about using the AMC exams and the CML stuff and the high-end SAT stuff. That's all great, but if that's what you're using as your premise, that is not what the SHSAT is about. The SHSAT is about thinking out of the box and doing other stuff like that. All right, so it's important to not obsess about certain things, but to oblige other things. So don't obsess in the beginning about your timing. That's going to be something you're going to work on and get over the 20 weeks. Okay, don't obsess and get all bent out of shape about your test taking skills as you go through the problems and learn more of the material and so on. It's also going to be revealed to you about parts of that. And that's the part when you get to August and September and October that you're going to hone. You're going to do this incrementally and iteratively and work your way through it, okay? So that when you finally get to the end, you have the subject material mastered, the English and the math, all parts of it. You're going to have your test taking skills mastered. You're going to have your pacing mastered. You're going to have your confidence mastered. You're going to be ready for test day at that point. That's what all this is about. Remember too that this test is as much psychological as there's anything else. A lot of kids just get blown, their mind gets blown on test day. And the truth of the matter is there's nothing like test day, okay? So you want to start out, again, in the next few weeks, focusing just on the basics. If you jump knee deep into this, I'm going to guarantee you that you might think you're okay, but a lot of kids won't be. It's only going to be a few who's going to be okay who jump knee deep into this. So you want to make sure you do the basics. Even extra do it, okay? You want to make sure you understand the nuances. You want to make sure you're thinking outside the box. You want to make sure you can be able to solve word problems of any sort. You want to make sure you're mastering the subject. You want to make sure you can deal with non-standard presentations of the questions. Again, a lot of you are trying to game the test by trying to memorize the question form, but there's always a whole bunch of questions that are the same question, but they're varied, just tweaked enough to blow your minds. Or there's a nuance in it that is not clear to you and you misunderstood the whole question, okay? And a lot of the kids are meeting the cutoff score for these schools just by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 questions, okay? So when it's getting down to that, you want those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 questions. You're the one who wants to be able to answer them, not the other kid, okay? You also want to be focusing on, starting from the beginning, about novel expression of the way these things are presented, okay? You want to make sure that's what you're doing, because that's what this test is about. It's not just testing how knowledgeable you are. It's not just testing rigor. It is testing knowledge and rigor, but it's also testing how you can deal with twists and thinking live on your feet, and how you can deal with stuff on that kind of a level. So as you cover the things, you don't want to just be a droid. You want to be a thinking human using your brain and your cognitive process. And on that, you don't just want to solve a problem in isolation. For example, a good thing is there might be a basic question on exponents, and that's cool. You might be able to answer that right away. But what if it's a multi-level word problem that requires you to come up with the theme, the idea that, oh, I need to use exponents, and it's hard enough that it uses a top-end thing of exponent. The exponent might be at a denominator using a negative exponent. And that kind of blows a lot of kids' minds, especially when it's trivial and easy. And by the way, a lot of the problems, especially on the math part, they're not using advanced numerals. Okay, the numeracy of the math part is not complicated multi-digit numbers and so on. It's normally things where things cancel each other out or something like that. And so they're testing your critical thinking and the way you approach a problem, and to be able to do that quickly and think on your feet. Remember, these high schools themselves are rigorous, so that's part of what's going on here. So they're testing your literacy fluidity and your numeracy fluidity as well, testing your number sense, testing how you can do things, your analytical skills, your high order thinking, your abstract ways of approaching problems. You need to know core terminology. If it mentions a quadruplane, you need to know what that it is. If it mentions an inequality, you need to know what that is. If it talks about a theme and a setting, you have to know how they're different. If it talks about precise language, know the difference between the normal English word and whether they're using terminology in the questions. This is all the stuff you need to do up front in the beginning, so that you're up to par into there. And don't miss the forest for the trees. So what you need to nurture yourself and get all to this. So again, it's an incremental, iterative process. And remember too, as much as it is about topics and so on, it's also about the psychology. And you have two competitors in this test. One is yourself and one is everybody else. And you need to do both. You need to take them in turn, and you need to take them together. And by the way, this is a good time too, if you're gonna take this SHSAT, to think about which specialized high school do you wanna go to. A lot of people are just like Stuyvesant. Stuyvesant is not the only school in the world, and for a lot of kids it's exactly the wrong school to go to. So don't just think Stay flexible. Look at all the specialized high schools and make notes of them, and actually don't pick one yet. Just pick one you think you're going to favor. And then what you can do is, when you take this SHSAT at some point, you're going to be comparing your score to what the cutoffs were in previous years. And by the way, I have a pretty mammoth sized testing software that I wrote myself to go through a whole bunch of scoring aspects. Some of it I did a YouTube on, but there's actually multitudes of other parts of the program that I wrote. That's going to check your grade just as a test taker. It's going to test it on the subject matter. It's going to test it on your pacing. It's going to test it on your weaknesses. There's like 50 different things I approach, and it gives reports and charts and a whole bunch of other stuff on that. So my students are able to get that as well. And that's critical to how you approach this. Otherwise, you don't really have a true feedback circuit. You can keep trying problems and seeing if you're getting them right or not, but you don't want to do that in a vacuum, and you don't want to do that just to the point of exhaustion. You want to have a rhyme or a reason behind some of this, all right? So start out by learning this stuff. I would recommend you actually don't do a practice test as soon as you possibly can, unless you know you're a super duper genius kid. Otherwise, don't do it. You're going to waste your time doing it. You're most likely going to fail in terms of, say, getting 100 on a test. You'd probably get a 50. You might even get a 70. That's still not good enough to get into these schools. So why waste your time doing that? What you want to do is iterate through some of the topics. Again, I have a YouTube, another live stream I did on the math topics, and another live stream on the ELA topics. And by the way, everything I'm saying now is applicable to the grade 8 SHSAT and the grade 9 SHSAT. So you want to do both of these. And just remember that prepping is not really about doing this to the point of being exhausting. Get the core stuff out of the way. Make sure you know the fundamentals. Master this stuff. Then work on the ingenuity and the thinking outside the box and the critical thinking and so on. And it's iterative. So when you're doing the beginning, when I'm saying focusing on the major errors you have or the major topics you don't know, I'm not saying to completely ignore the other parts. It's always incremental, but you want to be productive and move along and get these things right, so that by test day you don't melt. All right, so so this is pretty much what I want to say. Just, you know, now is a great time to start your SHSAT prep, and for some of the other tests as well. I tutor for all those as well. I'm Greg at GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com. My info will be down below. I encourage you to contact me. I encourage you to hire me as a tutor. And look through my channel. I cover pretty much every topic and subtopic of the SHSAT on my channel. I apologize, my channel's not organized, but there's such a wealth of different stuff in there. And there's little tidbits as you look through some of the coverage I give to it. I've gone over whole past tests online, including in the whole multi-part series. I've gone over the topics, exponents. I've gone over factoring. I've gone to the greatest common factor. So many different parts. And what you want to do is get it to the point where you're confident in the subject material, you're confident in what's on the test, you're confident on your pacing, you're confident on the test taking skills, so that on test day you're going to ace this. You don't have a worry in the world. The only problem is just figuring out you know, how to do the different parts. And that's really what it should come down to, and that's really the one of the last things you're going to do is you're going to figure out how to pace the whole test. Out of the 5 sections I was saying earlier, which ones are you going to do first? You don't have to follow the test in a linear fashion. Some kids do better doing the hard parts first and moving into the easier parts. Some do the flip. Some do the ELA part completely, and some do the math part completely after that. Depends on you. What you can do is after you've taken a number of practice tests, you're going to figure it all out. All right, guys, peace out. Have a great day.